So before we start on our new topic today, I want to look at a couple of things from our examples from last class, okay? And I want to kind of put your attention to things. So first of all, when we are filling in these tables, I want you to just make note of the fact that there was always one number that was a lot easier than the others, right? When we talked about these, we said how zero is always a nice and easy one. Because when you add zero to something, right, it just kind of makes nice things happen. It makes this x basically go away, and you're just left with that 3 number. Right? When I plugged in 0 here, it makes that 2x go away, and I'm just left with a negative 1. Right? When I plug in 0 here, it just makes this negative x go away, and I'm left with the 4. Right? So the first thing that I want you to kind of notice with these is that 0 is a really nice starting point. And whenever we plug in 0, it always just ends up that whatever this number at the end is what goes in our table. Okay? So that's thing number 1 to notice. 0 is a special point when you're graphing these. The thing number 2 that I want you to notice is that there's a pattern between these numbers. So hopefully you noticed this when we were filling these out, but take a look at these numbers here. You notice how your y values are always going up by 1 here? And you notice how there's a little invisible 1 in front of the x there? And on this one, these numbers, these are all going up by 2, right? We're getting bigger numbers and they're going up by 2 each time, right? Well, you notice there's a 2 there? And on this guy, these numbers are getting smaller. They're going down by 1 each time. And you notice there's a negative 1 there, right? A little invisible 1, but it's a negative 1. Okay, so those two things together give us a lot of valuable information because I can do two different things. One is that if I know my 0 point, I know that when I plug in 0, I'm always going to get out this number at the end, right? So that gives me a starting point. And then this number in front here tells me what the pattern is between these 2 points. And if I know what the pattern is, then I can just draw where the next point's going to go, right? And then I don't have to worry about trying to fill out an entire table. So that's the part that we're going to look at today. And what we do when we do this is we call it slope-intercept form. And it's just an easier way of graphing things by noticing those patterns, okay? So slope-intercept form, we look at it this way, y equals mx plus b, right? And all this means is just they're using m and b to represent the numbers because the numbers are different in every problem, right? So the m part, that is what we call the slope. So m stands for slope. I know you'd think it would be s, but s was taken. They were using that letter for something else. So they used m instead for slope. Okay. So slope, that is what the pattern is. So that is telling you what the pattern is between your y values, how much they're going up or down by. Okay. And then this guy at the end, b, that's called the y-intercept. Okay. So that's your y-intercept. And that is the easy point where x equals 0. Okay, because anytime you plug in 0, whatever this is just goes away, and you're left with just that number. Okay, and when you look at this formula, the thing that you need to remember is that whenever you're plugging things into this, m and b are going to be numbers. Okay, so anytime you're writing an equation in slope-intercept form, m and b are going to be numbers, but x and y are going to be variables, aka letters. Okay, so when you look at these examples here, you can see how that happens, right? M is the number 3 and B is the number -1, but X and Y are just still letters in here. Okay, so that's all we're talking about here. So what we're going to do to shortcut our graphing process is we're going to use this helpful little pattern we noticed. So the first thing is that I know that when X is 0, Y is going to be whatever this number is, right? When I plug 0 in, I'm going to get out -1. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I know when I plug in 0, I'm going to get out -1. So I'm going to plot that point. And we call it a y-intercept because it's always on your y-axis, the up and down one. So that point's going to go right there. Okay? And then the 3, that is your pattern number. Okay? But we're going to do kind of a little shortcut with this. It's always easier to do these when they're fractions. So I'm going to make this a fraction by sticking a 1 under it. Okay, so with our pattern, what we're going to do, right, is we're just going to go, what this is telling you is it's saying we're going up by 3 every time. So when I go to my next spot in my table, I should be going up by 3. So I'm going up by 3 when I get to the next one. Then I'm going up by 3 to get to the next one. We're going to talk a little bit more about slope later. Oh, I miscounted. Oops, this point's in the wrong spot. I only went up by 2. There's up by 3, so that should be there. Okay, and then there's up by 3, so that should be there. Okay, so what that's telling me is every time in my table, right, I'm going up by 3. And that's just like what we had in these other equations, right? This one, our pattern was to go up by 2. And we noticed that these y values, every time our x value went up one number, our y values went up one number, right? So that gives me enough information to graph this. All right, so let's try it again with the next one. Okay, so this one, this is my easy number at the end, right? So that's the point 0, 4. Okay, because we plug in 0, makes this fraction just go away, and I'm left with just 4. Okay, we call that the y-intercept because it's always on the y-axis. Run to 0, jump to 4. Okay, and then this 1/2, that is my pattern number. So this is telling me that every time I go over 1, I'm going to go up a half. So from this point, when I go over 1, I'm going up a half. Go over 1, up a half. Over 1, up a half, right? And there's a bunch of points. Without me making a table, I just found a whole bunch of the points. All right, and now let's do the next one. So this last one here, I've got a starting number, right? Well, my starting number is going to be at 0, 5. When I plug in 0, it just makes that nasty fraction go away, and we just get out 5. So here's 0, 5. Okay, and then my pattern is negative 2/3. Okay, well, negative 2/3. So that means that every time I start from this point, to go over 1, I have to go down 2/3 of a square. Yuck. Down 2/3 of a square is not going to be a whole number. So I'm going over 1, and then I'm going down 2/3. It's about, I don't know, there-ish. Right? And then when I go over 1 and go down 2/3, so there's a third, there's another third, it's about there-ish. Go over 1 and go down 2/3, that's going to get me back to a nice spot. Right? Go over 1, down 2/3. So this one's a little bit icky, right? Trying to go over and down 2/3 is kind of a pain in the butt. So our pattern did kind of make it easier. It's definitely easier than having to make a table, right? Imagine if we made a table of values and we had to plug numbers in for x and multiply by 2/3, right? So using this pattern made it easier, but it's not as easy as maybe it could be because we have to figure out this 2/3 of a box thing. Okay, so we're going to look as we keep going on in this unit. We'll look and see if we can find easier ways of doing this one that doesn't involve us finding 2/3 of a box every time. But this is at least a step up from making a table of values, right? It's a little bit of a shortcut where we can use a pattern number and a starting point and draw our lines that way.